Most people worry about retiring too early. They worry they'll leave work before they're truly ready. They worry they'll run out of money. They worry they'll make a mistake they can't undo. But after years of talking with people approaching retirement, I've noticed something surprising. Very few people retire too early. Far more retire too late. They spend years, sometimes decades, working longer than they need to. They keep telling themselves, just one more year. Then 1 year turns into three, three turns into five. Before they know it, the time they hope to enjoy has quietly slipped away. And here's the part that catches many people off guard. The amount of money they spent years worrying wasn't enough often turns out to be more than enough. The tragedy isn't that they retired too soon. It's that they waited so long to feel secure that they sacrificed years they could have spent living. Today, I want to help you avoid that mistake. I'm going to share 5 powerful questions, not complicated financial formulas, not confusing retirement jargon, just 5 questions. And if you can honestly answer yes to all 5, there's a very good chance you're more ready for retirement than you realize. By the end of this video, you'll have a clearer picture of where you stand in 5 critical areas: your work, your purpose, your income, your legacy, and the people who matter most. Most retirees focus on only one of those areas, usually money. The people who thrive in retirement pay attention to all 5. Let's begin with the first question. Question number 1, has work stopped giving back what you're putting into it? This question isn't about whether you're still capable. Many people approaching retirement are at the very top of their game. They're experienced, respected, valued by their employers. Their colleagues rely on them. In fact, some of the people most ready to retire are also the people their companies least want to lose. The real question isn't whether you're good at your job. The real question is whether your job is still good for you. Think about Monday morning. When the alarm rings, what is your first reaction? Do you feel energized, interested, curious about the week ahead? Or do you immediately start counting how many years are left? Because there's a huge difference between working because you want to and working because you feel trapped. I've sat across from countless people in their late 50s and early 60s who tell me the same thing. Their jobs are fine. Nothing is wrong. The pay is good. The environment is decent. Their boss appreciates them. But something has changed. The excitement is gone. The challenge is gone. The sense of growth has disappeared. They're showing up physically, but emotionally, they've already left. One gentleman described it perfectly. He said, "I don't hate my work. I just don't care about it anymore." That's a very different problem. When work becomes something you simply endure rather than enjoy, it starts taking more than it gives. It takes your energy. It takes your patience. It takes your health. It takes your time. And time becomes increasingly valuable as we get older. Here's a simple exercise. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you learned something at work that genuinely excited you? When was the last time you felt challenged in a positive way? When was the last time you finished a project and felt proud rather than relieved? If those questions are difficult to answer, pay attention, because retirement isn't always about reaching a financial number. Sometimes it's about recognizing that a chapter of life has naturally come to an end. Another important question is this: are you staying because work still enriches your life, or are you staying because leaving feels uncertain? Those 2 motivations may sound similar, but they're worlds apart. One is based on desire, the other is based on fear. And fear has kept many people working years longer than necessary. Here's perhaps the most revealing question of all. Imagine your finances were completely taken care of. Imagine every financial concern vanished overnight. Would you still choose to go to work next Monday? Not occasionally, not for a special project, but every week. Would you continue showing up? If your answer is yes, that's wonderful. Work is still adding value to your life. But if your answer is no, don't ignore it. That answer doesn't mean you should immediately hand in your resignation. It simply gives you important information that helps you make a better decision. Because understanding that work no longer fulfills you is often the first sign that retirement deserves serious consideration. But knowing you're ready to leave work is only half the equation. The second half is where many people stumble. And that brings us to question number 2. Do you know what you're retiring to, not just what you're retiring from? This question may be even more important than the first, because retirement is not a destination, it's a transition. And surprisingly, some of the people who struggle most in retirement aren't struggling financially at all. They're struggling emotionally, mentally, personally. For years, they dreamed about escaping work. Then one day they succeeded and discovered they had no idea what came next. One retiree once told me something I'll never forget. He said, I spent 30 years planning how to stop working. I spent 30 minutes planning what I'd do afterward. That imbalance created enormous challenges because work gives us more than a paycheck. It gives us structure, routine, identity, connection, purpose. Many people don't realize how much of their life is built around those things until they're suddenly gone. I've seen people count down the days until retirement only to feel lost within 6 months, not because retirement was a mistake, but because they had prepared financially and forgotten to prepare personally. The question isn't what you'll do during your first week of retirement. Most people can answer that easily. They'll relax, sleep in, take a vacation, spend time with family. The real question is this: what will your life look like 18 months later? What about 3 years later? What about on an ordinary Tuesday morning when the novelty has worn off? Will you have something meaningful pulling you forward? Because purpose doesn't retire. Humans need purpose. We need reasons to get out of bed, reasons to stay engaged, reasons to feel connected. For many successful retirees, purpose comes from 3 places. The first is relationships, deepening connections with spouses, children, grandchildren, friends, and communities. The second is contribution, using decades of experience to help others, mentoring, volunteering, serving on boards, supporting causes that matter. The third is freedom, not endless leisure, intentional freedom, the ability to spend time on passions that work never allowed room for. Travel, photography, golf, writing, gardening, learning a language, starting a small business, exploring interests that have quietly waited in the background for years. The happiest retirees aren't simply escaping work. They're moving towards something meaningful. And if you can clearly describe what your days, weeks, and months will look like after retirement, you're already ahead of most people. If that vision is still unclear, that's not a problem. But it is something worth figuring out before you leave your career behind. Because retirement works best when you're running toward a life you want, not merely away from a job you're tired of. Now let's move to the area that receives the most attention and yet is often misunderstood. Question number 3. Have you stress tested your retirement income, not just counted your savings? This is where many people become overly confident. They log into their retirement accounts. They see a number that looks substantial. Maybe it's $500,000. Maybe it's $1 million. Maybe it's considerably more. They breathe a sigh of relief and assume the hard part is finished. But having money and having a retirement income are not the same thing. In fact, they are completely different challenges. Think about it this way. Imagine someone gives you a large water tank. The tank is full. That's wonderful. But what really matters isn't how much water is sitting inside the tank today. What matters is how long that water can continue flowing. Retirement works the same way. The goal isn't simply accumulating assets. The goal is creating a reliable income stream that supports your lifestyle for decades. And that requires a deeper level of planning. I've met countless people who say something like this: I've got around $800,000 saved. If I withdraw 4% each year, that's about $32,000 annually. I'll be fine. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. The calculation itself isn't necessarily wrong. The issue is that life rarely follows a simple spreadsheet. What happens if markets fall sharply during the first few years of retirement? What happens if inflation remains higher than expected? What happens if healthcare costs rise significantly? What happens if one spouse lives much longer than the other? What happens if long-term care becomes necessary? These aren't pessimistic questions. They're realistic ones. Retirement planning isn't about predicting the future. It's about preparing for multiple futures. Because if your plan only works when everything goes perfectly, it's not really a plan. It's a hope. One of the greatest risks retirees face is something called sequence of returns risk. The name sounds complicated, but the concept is simple. If markets decline early in retirement while you're withdrawing income, the damage can be much greater than a similar decline later. Two people can earn the exact same average investment return over 20 years and still end up with dramatically different outcomes depending on when those returns occur. That's why stress testing matters. You need to know how your plan performs during good markets. But more importantly, you need to know how it performs during bad ones. A strong retirement plan usually has three key components. First, it has an investment strategy specifically designed for retirement, not accumulation, retirement. Those are different objectives. Accumulating wealth focuses on growth. Retirement focuses on balancing growth, income, stability, and flexibility. Second, it includes a thoughtful withdrawal strategy. Where should income come from first? Which accounts should remain untouched? How can taxes be minimized legally and efficiently? Small decisions made consistently over 20 or 30 years can have an enormous impact. Third, it has been thoroughly tested against difficult scenarios, economic downturns, inflation spikes, unexpected expenses, long life expectancy. Because retirement isn't about proving everything will go perfectly. It's about knowing you'll be okay, even when things don't. When you can look at your plan and know you've prepared for both sunshine and storms, confidence begins to replace anxiety. And that's a very different feeling. Now let's talk about something many people avoid because it feels uncomfortable, yet it may be one of the most important conversations you'll ever have. Question number 4. Have you planned what happens to your wealth after you're gone? Most people spend years preparing for retirement. Very few spend enough time preparing for what happens afterward. Understandably, it's not a topic people enjoy discussing. No one likes thinking about mortality. No one enjoys talking about death. But avoiding the conversation doesn't eliminate the consequences. In many families, wealth transfer becomes stressful not because there wasn't enough money, but because there wasn't enough planning. I've seen situations where family members had no idea where important documents were located. No one knew the wishes of the person who passed away. Beneficiaries were outdated. Estate plans hadn't been reviewed for years. The result wasn't simply financial confusion, it was emotional confusion, at a time when families were already grieving. One of the greatest gifts you can leave your loved ones isn't money, it's clarity. Clarity about your wishes, clarity about your intentions, clarity about how you'd like your legacy handled. Because inheritance isn't only about assets, it's about values, it's about ensuring the people you care about are protected. Think for a moment about everything you've worked for, the early mornings, the late nights, the sacrifices, the years spent building a career, the years spent saving, the years spent investing. All of that effort created something meaningful. The question is whether you've taken steps to ensure that meaning continues after you're gone. Do your beneficiaries know your intentions? Have important documents been organized? Have estate plans been reviewed recently? Have conversations occurred with the people who may eventually be responsible for carrying out your wishes? Many people assume they'll get around to these conversations later. Unfortunately, later has a way of arriving sooner than expected. The goal isn't to obsess over death. The goal is to remove uncertainty, because uncertainty creates stress. Preparation creates peace of mind, and peace of mind isn't only valuable for you, it's valuable for everyone you love. Which brings us to the 5th and final question, and in many ways, it may be the most important of all. Question number 5. Have the people closest to you been part of the retirement conversation? Retirement is often presented as a financial decision, but that's only partially true. In reality, retirement is a life decision, and life decisions affect more than one person. This is where many well designed retirement plans run into unexpected trouble, not because the finances are wrong, because the conversations never happened. One partner has been quietly thinking about retirement for years, running calculations, watching videos, imagining life after work. Meanwhile, the other partner has barely thought about it at all. Then suddenly one day, the announcement arrives. I'm retiring. To one person, the decision feels natural. To the other, it feels surprising, sometimes even shocking. The issue isn't bad intentions, it's lack of communication. For decades, many couples develop routines built around work schedules, personal space, daily habits, independent activities. Then retirement changes everything. Suddenly, you're spending far more time together. And while that sounds wonderful in theory, it often requires adjustment in practice. I've heard retirees laugh about this countless times. One spouse retires and immediately begins reorganizing the house, offering opinions, changing routines, interrupting established patterns. The other spouse starts wondering when work might become appealing again. The humor exists because the challenge is real. Successful retirement often depends as much on relationship planning as financial planning. Before retirement arrives, important conversations should happen. What will daily life look like? How much time will be spent together? How much independence will each person maintain? What dreams does each partner hope to pursue? What concerns remain unresolved? These conversations create alignment, and alignment creates harmony. The same principle applies to family members. Children sometimes have expectations, parents sometimes have assumptions, grandchildren create opportunities and responsibilities. The clearer these conversations become, the smoother the transition tends to be. And finally, it helps to have trusted professional guidance, not because someone else should make the decision for you, but because an experienced outside perspective can identify blind spots that emotions sometimes hide. The best retirement decisions combine facts and feelings, numbers and dreams, logic and purpose. When all of those elements work together, retirement becomes far more than a financial milestone. It becomes the beginning of a new chapter. Now, if you've honestly answered yes to all 5 questions we've discussed today, the evidence points in a very encouraging direction. You may be more prepared than you think, not just financially, emotionally, mentally, personally. And that's what truly matters. Because after years of speaking with retirees, I've noticed something fascinating. Very few people tell stories about account balances. Very few spend their retirement talking about percentages, spreadsheets, or investment returns. What they talk about are moments, the ordinary moments that suddenly became possible, the slow mornings, the coffee enjoyed without checking the time, the walks taken simply because they wanted to, the family gatherings they no longer had to miss, the vacations they finally stopped postponing, the grandchildren they got to know on a deeper level, the hobbies that transformed into passions, the experiences that became memories. Those are the things people remember. Those are the things that matter. Money plays an important role, of course, but money is rarely the destination. It's the vehicle. It's the tool that creates freedom, the freedom to choose how you spend your time, the freedom to prioritize what matters most, the freedom to live intentionally. At the end of the day, retirement isn't about reaching a magic number. It's about creating a life that reflects everything you've worked so hard to build, a life aligned with your values, your relationships, your priorities, your dreams. The 5 questions we've discussed today aren't rules. They're guideposts. They're a framework for reflection, a way to evaluate whether you're truly ready for this next chapter. And only you can answer them honestly. Because retirement isn't something that happens to you. It's something you create. One decision at a time, one conversation at a time, one step at a time. If you're standing at that crossroads today, wondering whether the time is finally right, don't focus solely on the numbers. Look at the bigger picture. Look at your purpose. Look at your relationships. Look at your health. Look at your goals. Look at the life waiting for you on the other side of your career. You may discover that retirement isn't an ending at all. It's a beginning you've spent decades earning, and perhaps, just perhaps, a beginning that's closer than you think.